Mr. Wathelet, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
At your place, in your working space.
Mm-hmm.
I came across a letter, an open letter you wrote to the Belgian government.
That's right.
It was published on an American website from
That's right.
Paul Craig Roberts.
That's right.
How did that happen?
I've been communicating with him, and he's obviously not a specialist about coronaviruses, and so therefore he was interested. He seeks different experts on a number of topics to have as much information as possible, and from that on we have been communicating regularly.
Okay. He's famous for he's an not mainstream journalist.
He's not a journalist. He's a former undersecretary of the economy, I believe, of the treasury, under Ronald Reagan way back. And since then he has been commenting. He's not really a journalist. He's been commenting on
deep state issues and geopolitics.
Everything.
Yeah, which is very interesting, by the way.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting line as well, link. But he published your letter in English to the Belgian government, which you wrote in French, of course.
Yeah.
And it was published in a French language paper.
It was published in French language. Actually, I wrote 3 letters. Okay, and the first 2 were published in La Libre Belgique, one of the newspapers in Belgium. And it was also published on various websites of medical doctors, organizations, things like that.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a 3rd letter just yesterday that was also published on this medical journal, but apparently the mainstream media is not really ready to publish something like that.
Because the letter is very, very alarming.
Absolutely.
It's about the coronavirus. It's about, you warned that the epidemic could change into a pandemic.
I think there's no question we already are in a pandemic.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already 2 days that CNN referred to it as a pandemic. There's no discussion, it's a pandemic.
The WHO warned a couple of days ago, after your letter of course, but they warned that the coronavirus could be a pandemic, but you say it's a pandemic already.
It's a pandemic already. I mean, it's silly to wait to get exactly the right definition when what matters is to respond to it as if it's a pandemic, because it's a virus with pandemic potential.
What was the reason that you decided to write such a big warning?
Because people call about alarmism, right? And alarmism is exaggerated response to a threat. But I don't think my response is exaggerated. I think that the response of the government is completely inadequate, inappropriate. And so I decided to write when I keep hearing and reading declarations by the government that keep on minimizing the threat because they don't want people to panic. And what makes people anxious is not knowing what's going on, and the government keeps providing completely contradictory information and keep minimizing the extent of the danger that the entire world is facing today.
And the main one of the important elements of your analysis is that the virus in Italy is much more fatal as the one in China. And
right. So that aspect was in response to one of the government experts claiming that we could expect in Belgium the kind of mortality that was shown in China in provinces outside of the Hubei province where Wuhan is located. And according to the Chinese government numbers, which are difficult to trust for a number of reasons, outside of Hubei, the rate was 0.7%. However, when you look to Italy, in Italy you can, early in an epidemic, it's useful to look at the number of people who have died versus the number of people who have recovered. Because you cannot really compare with the number of people infected, because the people who have recovered and who have died today are people who were infected at the same time, whereas the number of people infected today doesn't represent that. So when you compute that ratio, you find that the situation in Italy is completely dramatic. Now, you don't
because it's a very high number.
It's a very high number. You don't expect that number to be the final number. And in particular, I don't know the profile of the demographics of the people who were infected in Italy, and so it could be that that number will be reduced. But I would be so surprised that we would be able to reduce it to 0.7%. I think that's completely unrealistic.
It's impossible. Okay.
Right.
And so you wrote that there is a couple of strains from the coronavirus. There is a COVID-19A, COVID-19B, and a COVID-19C.
Right.
And what are we talking about in the world?
Absolutely. So this name was just to explain the concept. So when a virus starts to propagate, viruses keep on mutating. That's the nature. They keep on mutating. And among these mutants, some of them are going to propagate more efficiently. Yeah. And the virulence of the strain can vary depending on these mutations. So when we analyze the case fatality ratio in these different countries, we see that, for instance, in Italy and in South Korea, and in these are the two countries nowadays with the highest case fatality ratio. But you see other countries like Germany, where it seems the ratio is significantly lower. Now, the numbers in Germany for the dead and the recovered is too low, but it's clear that compared to the number of people infected, the strain in Germany is quite different from the strain in Italy. And it seems that, unfortunately for Belgium, most of the cases that have been imported were imported from Italy rather than from Germany, because people went to spend their vacation.
And what my point is then, the same applies to the Netherlands, because we have a lot of cases in the south, and they all came from Italy.
Right. So the same applies to the Netherlands, for sure. Yeah.
So the Netherlands and Belgium facing a pandemic.
The whole world faces a pandemic. At the level of a country, it's called an epidemic, but the whole world is facing a pandemic. And Belgium and Italy and the Netherlands have a strain, it seems like, that is particularly virulent.
Wow. And Italy is in a complete lockdown. The whole country is locked now.
Exactly.
Is that the right response?
Absolutely. That's the only way that you can stop an epidemic in a country is to put everybody in lockdown when the virus is propagating too fast.
And how many weeks do you see the virus in Italy going on? Is it predictable?
It's always extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen in epidemics because it depends on the behavior of everybody and the decisions that the governments are taking. But in the case of Italy, we know the course of this disease is that within 2 weeks, most people who were infected have started to develop symptoms. So if you lock down everybody at home, all the cases that are incubating, so to speak, will reveal themselves. So I think that at the minimum you need a quarantine period of 3 weeks, because with just 2 weeks you only pick up maybe 95% of the cases, and you don't want to leave 5% behind. With 3 weeks you get more like 98, 99. Ideally it would be 4 weeks, but you know that the government will never want to do
something. And then the virus is really dead, or what?
No, what happens is that all the cases are at home, and we know where they are. And so they stay at home, they're treated and all of that. And there are no new cases. That's the key, because nobody is moving. Instead of during these 3 weeks of home confinement, if we were back at the condition that Italy had before imposing the quarantine, the number of cases would double every 3.3 days. So in 3 weeks, it would multiply by 64. Right? So you have 10,000 cases in Italy. In 3 weeks, you would have that times 64, which is huge, obviously. So when you put everybody in quarantine today, all the cases are at home. They can emerge. These people can be taken care of, but no new cases are created. Every week that we wait, the number of cases is multiplied by 4. It's huge. And 2 weeks by 16, 3 weeks by 64. Right? So we would be at more than 500,000 Italian
there is no other option than a lockdown.
There's no other option than a lockdown, but emotionally, people are not ready for that, because we have never faced a pandemic in our lifetime. Nobody has faced. The last one was 1918, 1919.
Only China has some experience.
But they had experience with epidemics, not with pandemic.
Aha, okay.
That's the difference.
No one in the world has experience with
Pandemics since 1918, 1919.
Wow. And that's the Spanish flu.
That's right. Although it's actually believed that it originated in the US in military barracks.
Yeah. Do you believe that?
Yes, the data is clear.
Okay, because there's also a story that it was spread as well by Chinese people working in the First World War.
I've not heard that particular theory.
Okay, so you say it's an American disease spread.
Right, it's not an American disease, a disease is a disease, right? But I don't like the stigma that is attached to calling the pandemic of 1918 the Spanish one.
Yeah.
And it's the same reason why the World Health Organization decided to not name the disease, they name it COVID, so there's no attachment to Wuhan or Hubei or China.
Yeah.
That was the reasoning.
Okay. Well, it's a kind of similar virus as the 1918 virus?
No, it's completely different. The current one is a coronavirus, and the flu of 1918 was a flu virus.
Okay.
And but on top of that were also superinfection with bacteria that a number of people believe were the one that really, led to so many casualties at the time.
Yeah, and how does it relate to the laboratory viruses? I wrote when the coronavirus was in his first days in the news, so in China in January. Then I looked on the internet and I found an English or a British patent of a laboratory.
No. That's people misunderstand a lot of things because it's normal. I mean, it's difficult. It's very technical. A lot of these issues, but coronaviruses have been with us forever. Right, and so before SARS in 2002, 2003, there were 4 different human coronaviruses circulating in the world.
Wow.
In Belgium. And the Netherlands, or Western Europe in general, it's that they have these weird names that scientists give: 229E, OC43, and a more recent one is called NL63, and the NL is for Netherlands because it was discovered there. Right?
Oh, okay. And but those names no one will remember.
No one will remember.
The Spanish flu and the Corona and SARS. Those will be remembered forever.
Right, but the situation is very similar for these viruses because before viruses, when there's a zoonosis, right, when the virus jumps from a animal species to human, which is the case for most of the viruses, when they do that, initially they can be quite virulent, and that was the case of SARS, and this is the case of this coronavirus too. But if the virus becomes endemic in the population, what happens then is that it tends to lose virulence and it also tends to spread more easily because that's a natural evolution of viruses. They don't all behave that way, but that's natural tendency. And so all these viruses, we don't have to repeat the names, that I mentioned just a second ago are viruses that came at one is 100 years ago, another one 40 years ago, and so on. And initially they caused severe diseases, but as they became endemic, they became milder and milder, and for now these viruses just give you a cold and that's it, and it's gone.
But this one doesn't.
This one gives you much more than a cold. I mean, so let's be clear, about 80% of the people, it's a cold, maybe a bad one, but it remains a cold. The problem is that such a high proportion, like 1/5 of people, for who the disease is so severe that they need to be hospitalized. And that's a huge issue compared to the regular flu, because for the regular flu, it's like 0.2% of the people who get hospitalized. Here it's 20%, right? So it's a factor of 100. And so the strain that is being put on the hospital system, the health system, is tremendous.
It's heavy.
We will not be able to cope, and that's why I'm so insistent that we take this drastic measure without waiting anymore.
Well, especially in the Netherlands yesterday, I heard on the radio that a lot of people of one hospital became sick by the virus.
Of course.
Well, then it's already gone. It's already.
So on February 12th, that's a month ago, I sent a letter not to the minister or anything like that. I sent to the Minister of Health. They have a website.
Yeah.
That's the channel that you're supposed to use if you want to communicate with them, and I informed them of that danger to the hospital system. That was my first message to them. Watch out, you're going to have a problem with the hospital system. They didn't respond. And then when like 2 weeks later, I still see no response. That's when I wrote my first open letter. And 2 or 3 days later, the government expert specialist that were on the TV said, "Oh, it's an issue with the hospital system. We could be in trouble." So eventually,
that was Mr. Van Ranst, or
no, that was the Stefan van Gucht, I think is his name, is the head of the coronavirus cell in the.
Okay.
I can give you the exact name.
Yeah.
For the Belgian government.
Wow. So, and is there something more urgency now coming up in the Belgian government, or is it still?
Yesterday they decided to go to reinforced phase 2 of their plan.
Yeah.
Which is changing essentially nothing. So you have to understand that prior to the closing of the Italian territory, they could follow the progression of the replication of the virus in the population.
Yeah.
And the numbers were very strong, very solid, that 3.3 doubling time, right?
Yeah.
So they decide after like a week or 10 days to put these phase 2 measure in place, right? And then they look 2 weeks later and they find that this measure had no effect on the propagation of the virus. That's when they decide to put the Lombardy in quarantine, and then 2 days later they decide to put the whole country, because they realize that if they don't do it, they're going to be in an extremely, extremely painful situation. They're already in a very difficult situation when they have to make decisions between which patient to use the equipment that they have on that they're too short of, because of the fact that 20% of the patient need hospitalization, right?
Yeah.
So they're in a very difficult situation already when they're at a level of cases that is not that high, 10,000 for a country of 60 million, right? But because of the high proportion of severe cases, the hospital system is being overwhelmed.
Right. So it's in Italy, the pressure is almost not controllable anymore.
And that's why they made a very wise, very courageous decision to put the whole country in quarantine, when a lot of Italians, of course, don't understand that.
But the Belgian government, they stick to the plan.
They stick to the plan. They have that ridiculous plan that is not a pandemic plan, that is an epidemic plan, because the difference between the two is that in pandemic plan, you recognize that in the case of a pandemic, your normal lines of supplies for all the equipment are going to be interrupted. So unless you have strategic reserves of all the necessary equipment, not only for the normal operation of hospitals, but to account for the increase in the number of people who are going to be presenting themselves to this hospital, you have to have very strong strategic reserve, and Belgium has nothing in reserve. So they don't have a pandemic plan, they have an epidemic plan, and they're like bureaucrats waiting for the OMS to tell them, oh, we are in phase this, phase that, to act. But no, look at the reality of the situation. If you don't act today, every day you wait, more cases, more hospitalizations, more dead.
And today the first man or woman died in Belgium.
I don't know.
Yeah, I heard.
Okay.
It. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the Netherlands we have a couple of dead now.
Yeah. This number is too small to, to be meaningful statistically, but it's just the beginning. It's just unavoidable. As the number of cases increase, more people are going to die.
And the weakest people die at first.
Right.
But that's what they say. Well, they're old people. They were suffering already. They had some
pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, they had some minor flus in their health, and they were not. They had something with their lungs, and they're telling that with every single new death, man or woman, they're telling the same story. Well, it's an old man. He was 80. He had a lot of health issues, and
the whistleblower in China who was in much trouble because he started reporting on a professional website that there was an increase in atypical pneumonia in Wuhan. He died. He was 34 years old. Yeah. To think that just because you're not old is protecting you is a big mistake.
But because the weakest people die first.
Of course, absolutely, yes.
But it can happen in a couple of days that good young people die as well.
Yeah. There's actually reports, and I've not had the time to look deeply into them, that indicate that some of the strains, not all of course, but some of the strains seems to be, for instance, inducing heart attacks, which is really not something that I've heard in the case of the SARS virus from a number of years ago, and that would account for the kind of surprising things that have been witnessed on videos, both in China and Iran, of people who are walking and suddenly collapsing.
Yeah.
And you
recent videos.
No, they've been there already for a number of time, for some time, and so for respiratory disease, you don't expect somebody to collapse in the street.
No.
I mean, they're sick, they're weak, but they're not going to just drop dead like that.
Yeah, they don't go out.
They don't,
if you're sick, you're going to bed.
Right, you go to home and you go like that. Yeah. So I've seen that in videos of that in Iran and in China.
And those videos came from the last 3 months?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did China respond accurately to the virus?
So
you mentioned a whistleblower, so it.
Yeah. So they didn't respond well at first. That person was forced to sign a confession renouncing his statements on the web.
Okay.
After the visit by the World Health Organization in China, there was a communique by one of the health officials in China, who kind of warned the world, saying that we made the mistake. If you had acted in December or even in January, we would have way less casualties. But we made that mistake. And in fact, I get message from all over the place, and I got recently a message from a Chinese person I don't know, who said that it was excruciating to watch the Europe and the US made exactly the same mistake as the Chinese.
Yeah, President Trump is now denouncing the problem completely. He says it's just a mild flu. People I know are barely sick, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's pathetic.
Yeah. Okay.
But very few governments. Some governments have had very good reaction.
Yeah, like?
You can name Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan too, right? They have had cases, but they were prepared, unlike everybody else. And so they took right away the right measures, and they were able to control the epidemic. So it's possible to do it. That's what's so infuriating for me. It's that, when people were coming back from Italy, it's a crime from a public health measure not to quarantine them all. It's a crime. Yeah. There's no.
We had in my town 9,000 students or 900. They went 2 weeks ago when the virus went viral, and they still went to the winter sport and go skiing. And the public health organization said, well, there is no danger. Let them go. We checked them when they're back. And they did only a proof check when they came back with 4 people who had some complaints. They were coughing or whatever, and no one were positive tested. So they said, well, nothing happened. But they were skiing in the north of Italy, came back to my town, and in the whole north of the Netherlands there is no flu at all. Because the whole south is infected because of people went skiing in Italy, and now they just let loose 900 people fresh from Italy.
It's madness. It's madness with something that multiplies exponentially.
Yeah.
You need to act as soon as possible. But to let them in and not to put them in quarantine is a terrible mistake.
Yes, I wondered me about that. So you're
absolutely
sharing terrible. So there is a black scenario coming up for Belgium and the Netherlands and America as well.
Absolutely, America is in much worse shape. Because there are a lot of people, because of the absence of universal health care, A lot of people simply cannot afford to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
A lot of people are struggling so much financially, from job to job and here and there, that even if they're sick, they still go to work, right? So that's not a situation that's going to be conducive to controlling the epidemic.
Yeah, so the neoliberal economy is helping the virus
Absolutely.
a lot.
And you can even say that it's doing that systematically in the sense, systemically, in the sense that because every system has to be so optimized for efficiency in a world, there's no room for absorbing unusual traffic, and that's the situation in the hospital. There's no room to accommodate the new patients.
Right. Yeah. Well, if that is not alarming, then I don't know anymore.
Right. But the thing is that we must face the reality of the situation.
Yeah. So in Italy, just they were quite easy under the beginning of the endemic.
Yeah.
And then at once they decided to react.
Right. But the thing is, it's not that they were inactive. They
tried to do something.
The infection started and they were completely unaware of it. And that's normal. If you have a few cases here and there in a country of 60 million inhabitants, you're not going to pick them up easily. And they should have started testing earlier. They didn't.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's a mistake. But then they put this phase 2 measure in place. And much to their dismay, they realized that it was not making any difference. And that's why they had to go to the maximum measure of quarantining the whole country.
Yeah. And we're running out of tests already.
Yeah.
And that's a problem as well. If you let the virus going on and you don't make a complete lockdown, then you will have a complete lack of tests. So
as long as the people are confined home, even if they're sick, even if they cannot be tested right away, it's okay because they don't go contaminate other people. The only other people they can contaminate are the people who are in the same household. But that's much lower number than if they go around and interact with other people.
Yeah, and now you're organizing a kind of group of experts, right?
Yeah.
To make a stance against this
inaction by the government. Yeah.
Does it help?
We'll find out.
Yeah. When do you want to make the point?
So right now I'm collecting names.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put myself on social media to have more people contacting me, because right now people can contact me through LinkedIn, right? That's a professional network, but not everybody knows that you can go find somebody that way, right? So I'm going to have a few blogs and things like that to try to communicate, but all of that takes time to build the following, so I don't want to wait that long. And so I'm happy that my last letter, the most urgent one, was published in several websites that are consulted by medical doctors, pharmacists, and people like that. And so these people have much more voice than me, because these are the ones who are on the front line of fighting the disease.
Yes.
And so they've been very mild in Belgium. I don't know in the Netherlands, but in Belgium they've been very mild, and people have complained. I mean, medical doctors have complained that the organization representing the doctors are just too mild, because it's clear to them what the situation is. And so all my letters have been published on this medical website, and so people are flowing. And so the more people like that become aware of the situation, the more they're going to speak. And so that's the hope, is that we can quickly send a strong message that we just cannot wait anymore. It's very difficult to get politicians to do something else than politics. And they keep doing politics in Belgium instead of dealing with the reality of the situation.
Are there more elements or aspects of the case we have to discuss?
Well, we can discuss what happens next, right? So whatever the result, it's reasonable to think that the rate of transmission is going to decrease somewhat once we reach spring, and by Easter or something like that. Typically, it's start to wane a little bit. But human coronaviruses, there's no animal reservoir for them, so they are maintaining the population, even though we go through periods like the summer where
they can come back in October or November.
Every year there are cases of these coronaviruses, right? So it's very likely that this one will come back. the hope is that year after year it comes back less and less virulent. Right? That's something that we can kind of count on, because it's really the natural tendency for viruses.
Okay.
So in the meantime, during the summer, we have to prepare for the next flu season. And in my opinion, the most important thing is for every human beings is to have a mask. Right?
Really?
We shouldn't have this disposable mask. It's costly, it's not ecological, and all of that. You can have masks that either you replace a little filter, or even that is, out of fabric, and you can wash it to recycle it and things like that. Right?
Yeah.
And once everybody is protected by a mask like that, then you don't have to put the whole country in lockdown anymore.
We always loved about Chinese tourists coming here with their masks, or running around on airports or train stations, wearing masks all the time, and well, they're coming from another planet or doing crazy. But you say this is one of the most important things.
This is our future, unfortunately. I mean, the reason it's prevalent in Asian countries, they make no bones about wearing this kind of mask in public, is that the crowding in the city is so intense that if you don't wear mask, you expose yourself to really an increased chance of getting sick. So that's why they wear masks on a regular basis in Asia. And we, unfortunately, will most likely have to learn to do the same thing.
Yeah, in public.
In public,
Everywhere in public.
Right, as long as a virus like that is circulating in the country, you have the choice to stay home, or if you go out in public, to be protected.
But public, you mean crowded spaces?
Crowded space. If you walk alone on the street, there's no need to put a mask on, right? But you reach a mall, you go to a theater, a theater is a very good place to get sick. So in this situation, to wear masks, it's going to be a fashion thing. Like, you can be sure the young people are going to have colored one with motifs and whatnot.
We will wait until Nike comes with a designer mask.
Exactly. Right. And there's Chinese companies that have designed a mask that functions with electricity. From what I understand, I don't know any of the detail. I imagine that the air that you breathe is zapped by UV light. I don't know any of the details, but they have a mask like that then doesn't need to be replaced, because it just,
But the next years we send our kids to school with masks, wearing them all day in school.
Right. If the virus is circulating. If the virus is not circulating, there's no need.
So it's not... There's no precautionary wear of masks necessary. You can, when the virus is not circulating, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, do you have masks?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to. When I go outside now, because of my son, I have to go out with a mask. That part you need to cut out.
He has a flu.
He has some kind of flu symptoms.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Do you think it's corona? Or?
No, I don't think so. But of course I keep a close eye on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Sure. I'll leave you one last thing about coming years, right? Is that unfortunately, and I hear all these people who don't know what they talk about, right? Unfortunately, coronaviruses don't give you a good natural immunity.
They break down your immunity. Right,
and so for instance, there's already a number of reports of people who have become reinfected a month later. In normal, if you have the flu and you are infected by the same strain a month later, you're not going to get sick because you have antibodies that are going to fight off the virus, right?
Yeah.
So coronaviruses are different in that respect, number one, okay? Number two, so it has to do with how they enter the body and how they are able to produce certain proteins that neutralize different aspects of the immune response to them. So you can bypass that with coming with a vaccine that doesn't do all these things to the immune system, right? The problem with that is that coronaviruses are serious pathogens for poultry and pigs and various animals, farm animals. And so for many years, they've tried to make vaccine against these coronaviruses, right? And then they are faced with another problem, which is that in some cases, having antibodies against a virus make the disease worse, right?
Because it makes it stronger?
No, because in your lungs, you have the tissue that allows the air exchange between the blood and the air. And you have what's called resident macrophages. Macrophage is a type of white cells that sits tight it doesn't circulate in the blood so much, but it sits tight in tissues, and they act as sentinel to pick up any new invader, bacteria, viruses. Okay, and so if they pick one up, they send a signal to the rest that there's an invader in here, and they try to attack it. And most of the time they're successful, but sometimes they're not, right? So for instance, in tuberculosis, the mycobacteria gets inside the macrophage, but it's not killed. Normally the bacteria inside the macrophage are killed. It's not killed, and not only it's not killed, but it propagates there. And so you get these granulomas inside your lungs where the macrophage are like around the bacteria, but they're not able to kill it. Right? And so other viruses like dengue, and one is called RSV, which is another respiratory virus. It's respiratory syncytial virus, and it infects children typically. It's not a coronavirus, it's a paramyxovirus, and also they try to develop a vaccine against it, and when they test the vaccine, you had kids dying instead of not getting the disease, right? It was kind of a serious disease if you had a certain age, so it made sense to think you could develop a vaccine against it, but unfortunately it was not working, was making the disease worse. So there's no guarantee that we'll get a vaccine. There's good chance that we get antivirals that will be reasonably efficient, so there's good chance of that.
Okay.
But viruses always escape antivirals, chemicals, right, because they mutate. So at first, when the virus mutate to escape, it's good because usually the mutation slows down the virus.
Is that the reason that we have in Italy a much more aggressive?
No, because there's no treatment that was tried there.
Okay.
Right? But then, how does it work?
But was it a mutation?
The mutation happen all the time for viruses. It's just the enzyme that copies the genome of the virus make from time to time a little mistake, and each of these mistakes is a mutant. Most of the mutants just die because they're useless.
But they mutate all the time.
But they mutate all the time, and sometimes the mutation confers an advantage to the virus, such as faster spread. Right?
Yeah.
So for instance, the big difference between the SARS virus and the new coronavirus is that the new coronavirus has much more affinity for the protein at the surface of the cells of your lungs that it recognizes in order to enter the cells. So because it binds more avidly to it, it's more infectious, it causes more problems.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I gave you all the information.
Yeah, I think so, very much.
So you decide what you want to pick.
And none of this information is available in our mainstream media.
Of course not.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh, sorry. There's one more thing that I need to tell you. It's part of the whole picture that they don't tell you. That's why I want to mention it to you. So, the World Health Organization says that this virus is transmitted by two modes. Contaminated surfaces. People touch a door, whatnot, and then they touch their face and they contaminate themselves that way. Or through these tiny droplets that people produce when they cough, when they sneeze, when they shout, even speaking, sometimes you produce some, right? And these are kind of heavy as micro droplets, and they tend to fall through gravity within a meter of you, right? And that's why the recommendation is that you keep a distance from people. However, in contrast to the SARS virus, this one, where it was very rare that you had a transmission, is called by aerosol. So let me explain what aerosol transmission involves. So in that case, the droplets are much, much smaller. So when you breathe normally, if you are in a very dry environment, you're going to become dehydrated quickly because you constantly expel water through your breath. Right? And this water is, the droplets are so tiny that they stay in suspension in the air. So if you are contagious, these micro droplets are going to contain sometimes a little viral particle.
So they really go with the wind.
And they go with the wind. They don't stay there, they stay in the air. So, somebody is sick, they go out of the room, you come, there's a chance that you get infected. Of course, it gets quickly a small chance, but there's a chance. If you're in a theater, so for instance, let me give you an example. So in 2003, with the SARS virus, there were very few what's called super spreading events, where one person is able to infect many more person than a person typically on average infect. So, so there was a plane where there was a single passenger who was infected, and he contaminated 22 people on the plane. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's conversation like between the two of us,
then we can infect each other.
We can infect each other, but with the contamination by small droplets. But I'm not going to contaminate somebody who is far away, right? So in the plane, when you see where the person is sitting down,
22 people around him.
right? So not all around him, some are in front of him, some behind him, right? He was not talking to all these people. Some further away in the plane, like on the other side of the plane, further in the front or in the back.
And during the flight, you can't be the virus. You can't get the virus and infect another one.
No.
So this man has infected 22 people.
That's right.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's called a super spreading event.
Yeah.
These were very few with the SARS virus. Okay, but now when I look, and I can give you the document with all the arguments I'm making, I look at 8 factors, and all these 8 factors tell me this virus is also propagating by the aerosol route. Okay, so I'll give you just a few examples. In China, they knew they were dealing with a deadly virus, but they were out of these masks that protect very well. There are only these so-called isolation masks, surgical masks. They're just some paper in front of you, essentially. So these are used for procedures, medical procedures or dentists or whatnot, because if there's a splash from the patient, it protects you. It protects you from talking with somebody else. You're not going to get infected. Okay? There are 3,000 medical personnel in China who were infected by the virus when they knew they were working with a dangerous virus. And all the pictures from Wuhan showed them with this simple isolation mask. Right? So if they had the other mask, they would not have been infected. The difference between the two masks is that the other mask, the N95 type or FFP2 types, protects against aerosol, and the regular isolation mask does not protect against aerosol. That's a very strong argument to say that this virus propagates by aerosol, right? So there are many others. I will give you the whole list.
Okay, thank you.
And the simple fact that the virus, on average, in the absence of normal isolation procedure that are being put in place in various places, but in the absence of this procedure, one person on average infect 7 others. That's huge, 7 others, right? So the goal of the public health measure is to decrease that number below 1. You control when you are below 1, right? So the health measures that are put in place decrease from 7. So no, I should actually look at another number, the doubling number. So they say the doubling number for the virus is 6.7 days, based on the Chinese data, which you absolutely cannot trust. So 6.7 days, but we are 3.3 days. Okay, so if it were not for this public health measure, the doubling number would be 2.4 days. So with the phase 2 public health measure, we can go from 2.4 days to 3.3 days. But that's not enough.
No.
We have to go to infinity days.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay.
And aerosol transmission is one of the reasons why also I heard on the radio 2 days ago, Belgian radio, saying that we consider a possible transmission between kids who sit next to each other for 4 hours in a classroom. Okay? There are videos out of China that show you, they've documented the videos everywhere nowadays, right? So they've documented 2 cases of transmission of one person infecting multiple persons in food markets. Okay? And they've documented in the 2 markets the shortest interaction that led to an infection. You want to take a guess?
Yeah.
Do you want?
No. Yeah. The when you pay.
No. Without exchanging anything.
Okay. Yeah.
Just talking, separated 2 or 3 meters by a fruit and vegetable display. 15 seconds were enough in one case.
15 seconds.
15, and in another case 50. 1550. Right. So in less than a minute of interaction at quite a distance, you have transmission. That's aerosol transmission.
Yeah. Wow. So and they managed to reconstruct the time that some people had contact.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's very very fast.
The goal is not to panic people. Panic helps nobody. The goal is to point out to people this virus is very, very dangerous, and you have to do absolutely everything you can to not get infected.
Yeah. And not many people are recovered.
I have the list on my computer.
Yeah, but in the Netherlands or Belgium,
no, but
very few.
In Belgium and the Netherlands, it's too early. Okay, it's just too early to.
In China, they recover very fast now, and
right now, with this super strict public health measure of putting 60 million people in quarantine.
Yeah, 16 million.
60.
60.
60.
Yeah.
Right, and a lesser quarantine to 400 millions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, unless we do the same measures, we will not contain the virus.
Yeah.
We are not prepared, emotionally. In our countries, we like our freedom. We like to go to the pub if you feel like it, and all of these things. But face the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's clear. Again, thank you.